and Wickham, as always, in the room. We're moving on to agenda item 11, which is 22/01681/FUL. This is new lighting installations and change of use of existing loading bay to an event space, and it's street record King's Walk. Case officer is Robert Green, and when you're ready, Robert, we're ready to hear your presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. First, to highlight the location of the application site, highlighted here in red. Just to point out some features here, we have the Guildhall at the bottom of the image with the Broadway.
Yeah, just bear with us. We don't have the presentation on the screen.
There we go. Thank you, Chair. I'll start again on that one. First, highlight the location of the application site. So we have Guildhall at the bottom of the image here, the Broadway running into the High Street, Brook Shopping Centre here, and this wider area is part of the central Winchester regeneration area. To highlight the site's characteristics, the entire area in this image is part of Winchester Conservation Area. The pink buildings with green dots are listed buildings, and you also have St John's Almshouses off to the right of the image here. We have the scheduled monument of the cathedral down at the bottom of the image, and the closest site of special scientific interest is the Equestrian, which is just off to the side of the image. We also have non-designated heritage assets here at the Antiques Market and Wallstaplers Hall here. An aerial image of the site. So this is King's Walk shown by the star, and that's the Antiques Market you can see there, surrounded by buildings, and Wallstaplers Hall. And again, both of these are non-designated heritage assets. So the proposal is to introduce lighting into the courtyard area of the building and in the entrances to the shopping centre, and also to change the use of this current loading bay in the corner here to an event space. Starting first with the lighting, the plan is to attach wires between the Antiques Market and the King's Walk building, and that will hold the suspended globe lights here, and I'll show you an image of an example shortly. The applicant's making wider improvements to the courtyard space, including seating, tables and planters, which aren't part of this application. And this is the courtyard at the moment, looking towards the Antiques Market, known as the Nutshell. And a slightly different perspective. As you can see there is temporary lighting between the two buildings already, and the proposal is to replace these with a more permanent feature connecting between the Antiques Market and the King's Walk building. There are some other areas of lighting across the site too, with these light fixtures at the entrance to the building. These suspended globe features in the entrances to the King's Walk Shopping Centre, and this is an example of the suspended globes or spheres that you have from the wires across the courtyard. Moving on to the event space, so this is the view from Tanner Street of the outside. As you can see on the right inside, it's currently used for the storage of bins. The applicant proposes to change the use of this loading bay to an event space. This use falls under class F2B, which is halls or meeting places for the principal use of the local community, and that covers performances and renting of the wider space for community events, and that's been assessed from a residential amenity and noise perspective in the report before you. The section that you see at the top there is taken from the same perspective as the image below, so you can see the applicant's intentions to add a timber stage inside and just general internal improvements such as painting and adding lighting. Just for perspective, this is the view from the outside of the event space. So I have my back to the event space door here, looking out across the car park with St Clement's Surgery to the left there and the almshouses just there in the distance in front of St Giles Hill. Officer's recommendation is to approve the application, Chair. That concludes the presentation.
Thank you very much. And we have no public speakers, so we go straight into the consideration of our reports. Although there are several pages of it, starting on the 10 pages, in fact, starting on 131. I propose to take questions on any section, and it doesn't matter if you ask more than one question. Councillor Rutter.
Thank you, Chair. You talked a lot about the lighting. Is it all going to be LED lighting?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll just get to the section of the report that explains, just so I can remember off the top of my head. Yes, so that has been confirmed by the applicant, and they say that the majority of the lighting for the scheme uses existing cable infrastructure. It all meets the British standards and recommendations, and it's proposed to replace old fluorescent and sodium pressure lighting with a new energy-efficient LED lighting.
Brilliant. And my second question, from the event space, is where are the bins going to go?
Yes, I have asked that question of the applicant separately, and there is an alternative location, I believe, within the Brooks area, but there is space for them elsewhere within the applicant's ownership.
Thank you. Is there going to be any businesses operating when it's dark down that area?
Other than the shops for the internal area, obviously that depends on their opening hours. The lighting, as conditioned, I believe from memory, is to turn off at midnight, and that was agreed with the applicant because there are alternatives as well. So it's not a case of shut down dark. It's just for the purposes of energy efficiency to make sure that these lights are off at an appropriate time, but it doesn't go to pitch black.
I mean, I'm just wondering whether it's going to be used after 5 o'clock at all.
Yeah, potentially that depends on the small businesses and their opening hours, which I don't have to hand, but this gives them the flexibility to have the lights on as long as needed.
Thank you, Chair. Robert, this is part of the central Winchester regeneration area. Is this application part of that, or is it going to compromise what is going to come out of that special planning document?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this is part of the central Winchester regeneration area, and that's why the report does focus on the supplementary planning document as well, in terms of assessing the objectives of that document. So it's assessed in two ways. The SPD does see these meanwhile uses coming forward in the interim, so it's been assessed on that basis, but also to make sure that it doesn't limit the future potential for regeneration. So the recommendation has covered both of those points.
Councillor Westwood? Oh, Edward, sorry, wrong, Chris.
I'd like to focus, since we're invited to look anywhere in this, at the issue of noise. The loading bay is supposed to be available for a performance space and essentially three-sided. I imagine most of the noise would come out of the front onto what's currently the vacant space between the surgery and unused buildings and bus station. That doesn't seem so problematic, but we have had objections to this planning application from in other directions. And what I'm seeking clarification about is the rear wall of the loading bay. It appears from information in the pack that part of that is basically not a wall, is an open space, and thus sound could permeate that direction as well. And I'm just asking if that is a correct assumption, and mitigation you might.
Thank you, Chair. So I think I don't have a direct image of it, but you can just see, again, very difficult through that small crack in the door there where you can see daylight. So that I think that's the space that you're referring to. When the application was submitted, we did ask the applicant to submit a noise assessment, and that's where these hours of use were proposed. Working alongside our environmental protection colleagues, we've looked at the mixture of uses in the city centre. And obviously in a city centre environment, you expect these different types of uses. And we've assessed that from a residential perspective, where there are the residences, Coitbury House being the closest one, but also the businesses in light of the comments that we received as well. And just to the intensity of the space and the control that we can have by restricting the hours, beyond unsociable hours, then we're satisfied that there's no harm in terms of the businesses and any residences in the area as well, and that's taking account of that gap as well, the rear wall.
If I may, Chair, has there been any consideration of a noise limit being stipulated condition, X number of decibels?
No, there hasn't, Chair. It's been, as discussed with the Environmental Protection Team, they're happy with the controls that we've got in place, and obviously they have their own legislative processes as well, separate to this.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate that Councillor Rutter asked regarding the bins. I'd like to follow on from that, if I may. Obviously, we anticipate it's going to be busier here in this area. You say that they will find a home for them somewhere in the centre, the Brook Centre. There's obviously going to be an increase. So do you happen to know exactly where they are going to be? Because this could have an effect of people walking past areas. There's other parts of Winchester where bins have been relocated. A prime example is as you drive away from McDonald's up on the left-hand side, you've got a pizza restaurant there with a beautiful building and umpteen bins stored outside with a wall that's been hit. So I just wondered the exact location of where these various bins will be, if that's an appropriate question to ask at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm afraid I'm not aware of the exact location. I was just informed that it is somewhere within the Brooks complex, as it were. So I can't go into details on precise details, I'm afraid.
Could I ask, on page 132, Roman 6, they talk about landscaping, which doesn't require permission, but I can't think where landscaping would be in this application.
Yes, so that's sitting as part of the applicant's wider project here. The intention is to add a lot of planters which don't need consent when a local authority is doing it. So there are intentions to add more greenery, obviously not as part of this application because they don't need consent in themselves.
Thank you. And then Roman 7, we're talking about respecting archaeological remains. Perhaps this isn't the way things are, but I would have thought this was an opportunity to find out what was there underneath.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Because the application isn't involving any heavy works, it's all internal changes of use and obviously stringing lights from the top as well. There's just no requirement to ask for any written schemes or anything like that because the application itself isn't causing any harm or need of mitigation.
No, I understand that. That doesn't quite answer my question because there are works going on, and it is an opportunity, which obviously hasn't been taken up, to discover what is underneath this structure.
There will be opportunities throughout the general regeneration future applications on this precise site as well, so that those details will come. It's just not at this time.
Okay. Any further questions? This is the City Council's own application, so it's only right that we treat it as any other application. I have to say, if my comments could be passed on, I'm very disappointed that no one has come to support this application from the officers, but this is nothing to do with the planning officer. But one would have thought that someone from the City Council could have come and answered questions. Councillor Pearson.
Yes, I agree entirely with your remark, though, Chairman. It is disappointing indeed. Almost like getting in through the back door. But nonetheless, we've got to look at this application as it is, as you, I'm sure you will agree. I also was disturbed about this landscape feature, do not require permission, lack of archaeology. But lack of archaeology is no excavation, as I understand it. But when we were looking at this site originally, particularly the loading bay area, is for the previous Central Winchester application, there were concerns about that area and the vulnerability of the structure above the loading bay, i.e. leading into the car park that was up there. Now, I don't see anything in here about what you might be doing about strengthening that section of the building. And as Councillor Edwards quite rightly said, there was a big gap there. Remember, frequently when I was up at that car park, you used to look down into this loading bay area, right-hand side. You're effectively in the open air. The noise is an issue, but as I understand, that's going to be dealt with by environmental health under normal regulations. Am I right in all of that? I know I've said a lot there, but
yes, correct on the environmental health point. And also, when you're referring to the structural side, the applications assess the change of use of that space, and it's for the applicant to ensure that all the safety, all the other regulations that it would need to be complied with are met with. But I'm happy to pass that point on to them, to the applicants, and make sure that's covered.
Any further questions? If not, then we'll move into debate. Councillor Pearson.
yeah, I was disturbed about the apparent links with the supplementary planning document relating to this area, and indeed the more recent concern on behalf of the businesses in the retail section. Now, can we have your assurances that we're really just talking about in that area outside what used to be called, well, the nutshell building, that what was planned for that area as a performance space, I think was the phrase we used when we were looking, and indeed the proposed changes to the retail section, nothing in this application about it, but are they going to be compromised by LED lighting? Is not hardly warrants a planning application. It makes me a bit nervous of what else is actually in here you have to do for that. I mean, I'm too sure about the lights that are already there. I mean, it could have done better on those. That is part of the application. So is that link with what is in the supplementary planning document that does not seem to be obvious in your report, as good as I think it is?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so the elements before us today are those that.
No, sorry.
So the elements that we see before us today are those that need a planning application. So when we were discussing the wires connecting between the two buildings, considering it's the antiques market, non-designated heritage asset, that's why we asked for an application to allow us to assess it and obviously allow the public to comment on it as well. So the only things that we have today are the lighting, just the wires, and the change of use of event space. Anything else within that area that the applicant wishes to do is obviously separate to that, and majority of times it doesn't need consent.
Are you saying that if we look at the bus route, it comes past this loading bay, access to that loading bay, or the use of it as a bus route opposite the entrance to Marks and Spencer's parking area is not going to be compromised by anything that is proposed in this? I just want assurances.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
You know, if that does happen, we can say, well, hang on, we had assurance this wasn't going to happen. Okay, thank you, Robert.
Right, we really are in debate. I did allow Councillor Pearson his question, but are there any more questions before we move back into debate? So, debate.
Sorry, Chair, I thought mine was a question, but...
You've got another question? No, okay. Debate. I'm going to start debate so that we know that we're in debate. I I'm totally supportive of this scheme. I think it will improve the public realm and especially the public event space. Express my disappointment that we've got no one who's devised the application here. But I see that the City Council has consulted the community and they are in favour of the proposal. So I just have this slight hesitation about condition 5 on the event space going on till 12 o'clock on weekdays, but we have legislation to control that should there be any problems. So I'm going to vote in favour of the recommendation. Any other contributions? So
Sorry,
this
sorry, Chairman.
application. Oh,
The only
yes.
thing I would add to what I said was about this retail area at the entrance. It is incredibly controversial, that area, leading down to past the Cycle Cafe, or what used to be the Cycle Cafe.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of press comment about that, or comment in the press about that in the past. And it's a much more sensitive area than I think most of us realise. Because, of course, you've got the market opposite there. And what is relatively superficial, but I'm still a little bit concerned about what it may lead to.
Yeah, I mean, are you proposing, I don't think we can add a condition, but are you proposing an informative that attention should be paid to that area?
Yes, I am, Chair, because this is something that was emphasised in the SPD. Yes, it's in the SPD to update it and modify it. In that sense, it does comply with that. But as I say, I think there must be an informative about that retail area that which is incredibly controversial, rightly or wrongly, it is. And it's in fact, it's the main public entrance into that area. So yes, informative, something like that.
I'll take officer advice on that when we come to vote. Councillor Rutter, you wanted to speak?
Yes, I just wanted to respond really in debate to Councillor Pearson's comments. Actually, as a user of those shops and cafes and the whole area, I'd just like to say I think the whole area is significantly improved, and I think that the fencing and everything else has worked incredibly well. So I don't really see the issue. I think it has been respected. That area clearly is important in terms of. But what we're talking about here is a meanwhile use, isn't it? We're not talking about, something that's going to last for more than perhaps 5 years at the most. So, I think it's going to be an incredible improvement, and let's just get on with it, regenerate that bit in the meanwhile, improve things until we can actually finally knock the wretched building down and start again.
Mrs. Pinnock is going to talk on that subject.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to sort of, I know this, as you say, this is a meanwhile use, and I think it would really be outside of the scope of this application to require other off-site measures. I think given that this is a City Council application, Mr. Green can report your comments onto the corporate head of place that's overseeing sort of the wider project. But I don't think an informative is reasonable on this application or necessary because it doesn't link to this proposal. So it would be hard to say, don't forget you've got to do something else, someone else, and that just isn't reasonable or necessary on this application, Chair, in my view.
I think where we are is we were noting your concern, Councillor Pearson, but we don't in this instance think that this application will need an informative. Is that what you're saying? Is that what the committee agrees? Yeah, general nods. So, anything else in debate? So this application has been recommended for approval. Those in favour, please show.
That's 8 unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. I should perhaps say at this stage for those listening that we don't have Councillor Reid with us this afternoon because he's not been feeling well. So 8 is full approval from the committee. Thank you. So we now move on to agenda item 12, 22 /01683/AVC, which is Middlebrook Street, Silver Hill and Tanner Street. And it's again King's Walk in Winchester. And again, Rob is the case officer. So when you're ready, Rob, we're ready to hear your presentation.
Chair, we're just getting the presentation sorted over for you.
Yeah. So for those listening at home, we're just bringing up the presentation on the screen.
Thank you, Chair. So sticking with the same site, again, I'll just go over the location to remind members. So again, just points of interest, we have the Guildhall and the Broadway leading into the High Street, the Brook Shopping Centre and the wider central Winchester regeneration area here. And again, with a separate case, just to highlight those site characteristics. So the entire area shown on this image is the Winchester Conservation Area. And you have listed buildings in pink with the green dots, with St John's Arms houses off to the right, the River Itchen, Triple SI again off to the right, and the scheduled monument of the cathedral down there on. Again, the aerial view with King's Walk shown by the star, with the Antiques Market and Wall Staplers Hall here, both of which are non-designated heritage assets. Now, the proposal is to introduce advertisements across the King's Walk building. I'll present them based on these three streets. So just to orientate ourselves, we've got Middlebrook Street to the left with the brooks off of the image, Silver Hill along the bottom, and then Tanner Street to the right there. Starting with Middlebrook Street, I'll start with the image as it is now and then move on to the elevations. So this is the current Middlebrook Street view. So I've got my back to the Brook Shopping Centre here. And the applicant intends to add the King's Walk branding to the window in the centre here. And just a reminder that the existing shop branding is shown in these white areas here. So just that last image that we showed. And then moving on to the Silver Hill elevations, you'll note these doors which lead into the back of the existing shops in the King's Walk Shopping Centre. And the proposal along Silver Hill. So you can see here the painting of the lower level in that anthracite grey colour, the replacement of the doors here, and also the painting of the corner signage with the King's Walk logo, and the painting of the circular graphics along the length of the Silver Hill Street. Just showing that in a bit of closer detail. So you can see those doors that I mentioned, which are redesigned with the shop name above, and the painting with the circular graphics on the lower level. You can also just see the small Central Winchester regeneration sign, which is in the recessed door here. Moving on to Tanner Street, you can see the corner walls where those corner signs will be put. So you have King's and Walk on the separate walls. And you can see the large doors of the event space from the item there on the right. And that view in the opposite direction. And you can just see the cathedral popping up above the high street there. And this is the proposal along Tanner Street. So you can see that corner sign, again painted onto the and the circular graphics which extend onto the event space door. Officer recommendation is for approval there.
Thank you very much. No speakers again, so we move straight into the report. Well, we'll take it section by section because there's probably more to answer on these. So the principle of development on page 163, 164, first of all. If there are no questions, then we'll move on to the impact on character and appearance of the area. Rob, I see that the City of Winchester Trust have objected to the painting of the walls, which doesn't require planning permission. Is this the City Council's attempt to look modern in a sort of not modern building, or?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, that is correct. The painting of the wall itself doesn't need consent. The circular graphics form part of that wider branding, which is being seen used across the building. That's why the report continues to assess that. So yes, it is just a way to tie in the building to have this the new rebrand, and the applicant's chosen circular graphics for that.
I think I probably agree with the City of Winchester Trust. It's not for consideration today because it's not part of the application. But Councillor Westwood?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Rob, just a question on the doors. Sorry, on Silver Hill. You said they were going to be painted shop signs over them. Is the intention to allow access to the shops from Silver Hill?
That would be possible, yes. Obviously, dependent on what the shop users would like to do, but they are being reopened. Yeah.
Any further questions on the impact on character and appearance of the area? Anything, even the painting on the walls, would probably be an improvement, wouldn't it? Because it's not the most beautiful building in Winchester. Councillor Pearson?
Yeah, coming back to the painting on the walls, I must admit, if we're talking about changes, I mean, let's face it, Tanner Street does need beautifying. Anything going in that direction is going to help. You've carefully chosen a photograph of it with no traffic in it. Goodness knows what time of the day you took that photograph. Because every time I've gone down there, it's been sparkling almost nose to tail. And there's, of course, a couple of bus stops there. I would be happier, I've got to say, instead of painting, there's something like mosaics on those walls. It's more of a permanent feature rather than one somebody's 21st century idea of graffiti. We have examples of that not far away, and I've got to say it's never been something that attracts me to that part of Winchester. If these were mosaics of some sort, perhaps a competition to come forward as we've done in Morrison's Close, I'd be much in favour. But are we talking questions or debate here? Yes, what?
Well, it's not for the painting of the walls are not for consideration, so
Isn't
it's no, they don't need planning permission. But it's subjective, isn't it? And I think I agree with you. But,
yeah.
Because what the sort of garish ones look like something out the 70s. Yeah. But perhaps we're moving back into 70s. I don't know.
Okay.
Retro style.
Yeah. Let's come back to this then. All these doors, the back of the retail shops are there, slightly different colour. Is there any security lighting along there? Because you've got a security issue if that area is not lit. If you're going to talk about those stores being permanent, someone should have thought of that issue.
Nothing shown as part of this or the previous item that we had. I've just pulled up that image there, and you can just see lighting above King's Walk there. So the area does look it's got existing street lighting, but no, nothing's part.
Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Chair. I'm struggling to find, and maybe I'm going to be told that, well, actually, they don't need to do one, a highways report on this, because obviously with it becoming an events place, this is going to be busier, this area. And if you look at page 180, the pictures of Silver Hill, you can already see that somebody's parked a car there on technically what is a pavement where people walk. And there's actually a lovely couple having to walk in the road. So I'm wondering, are there any plans to involve highways in this application, or have I missed something, if I may ask, Chair?
Councillor Cook, there is on page 161 no objection from the Highway Authority. So you make a valid point. Do you want to expand on that, Rob?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Highway safety is one of the sort of limited aspects that we can consider under advertisement consent. 'Cause it's a lighter touch than as part of public safety. Yeah, just as a precaution, I did consult the Highways Authority, and as the Chair correctly said, they have returned with no objection.
So that's as far as we can go, Councillor Cook.
Thank you for bringing it to my
If they're
attention.
not
I
worried,
apologise for
then-
missing it, but
Yeah.
well, concerned.
Right, any further? We were on, sorry, the character of the area, were we? Yes. No further questions on that. So then we have development affecting the South Downs National Park. And they're very popular today, aren't they, the park? But it is actually a distance from the park, and that doesn't harm the statutory purposes of the national park. So we move on to historic environment. Starts on page 166. Councillor Pearson?
Yeah, I agree with what you said earlier on. It's a pity that we can't put a watch brief, but there's no excavation involved in any part of this application, or either of these two applications. So I find it difficult to see how we would come at that issue from our point of view. Am I correct in thinking that, Robert?
Yes, that's correct. So no archaeological locations.
Yeah.
Another lost opportunity to see what's underneath, yeah. But of course, it is expensive, and the applicant has to fund any excavations, and it does delay a development. And so presumably those are the two reasons for not digging up the ground. Then we have neighbouring amenity, sustainable transport, and ecology and biodiversity. And nitrates and phosphates. Oh, and the last bit, the drainage and equality. Any questions on those? Or the conditions? No? So we're in debate. Councillor Pearson?
I'm sorry to be taking up more time, but I feel it's important. And one of the issues in this application is impact on the immediate environment, whether it be historic or the actual physical environment. And yet we're saying that advertising along here, or even the wall decoration, which actually is mentioned in your report, so I can't understand why it's not part of the application, becomes significant in that, in my mind. The other issue that I have is, of course, this street, Tanner Street, and down past the access to the event area is on the bus route. Now, and there's no comment from the bus company about that, because it was relatively recently diverted in that direction. You say in the report that it has no impact on the bus station itself, but nothing about any impact on the bus route. Now it's always difficult when we look at transport in applications, because we're more concerned about sight lines than the actual road traffic, pedestrian traffic largely in this case, is going to, if we want to increase pedestrian traffic in this area, which we do, sake of the retail sector in this area, not only in Tanner Street, but also King's Walk. And we're hoping to increase foot traffic, particularly in the centre of Winchester. And I'm a little surprised that that's not been taken into consideration, either by street design or any sort of system. Everyone seems to have backed away from that issue. I'm also a little bit concerned if we're going to paint the walls, vinyl, it says in the report. Personally, I would much prefer to see, as I said, some form of mosaic which would attract tourists. Same sort of issue, thing that we talked about and St. Maurice has covered. which is not that far away from here. The other issue is that, we refer to the no comment from the Southdown National Park. I hope whoever's taking the minutes actually takes note of this issue, because the station approach, one of the issues in that was because the national park is not taken into account, and that's still much farther away. The view into that area, which in actual fact within planning committee it was, but because it wasn't minuted, it was criticised, and of course it felt rightly or wrongly that's an issue. And so I'm always a bit nervous about comment from the national park. I agree with what you said earlier on, Chairman. You can't actually see this site from the national park, but it's got to be something into consideration. But yeah, I go along with what Robert is actually recommending. I can't see any reason why, other than those worries I have, why you should turn this down.
Any other comments, Councillor Rutter?
Just to remind members again, it's a meanwhile use. Anything we can do along there is going to improve it, because it's so dreadful at the moment. And although it's not part of the planning application, of course, there's a lot of planters and things going in. So it's going to be a greener area as well as a more attractive area and done up and painted. So, let's just get it passed.
With respect, Councillor, it wasn't me that said it, it was the court.
Any other comments? Councillor Clear.
Robert, I will be supporting it. And yes, I know it's a meanwhile use, Councillor Rutter. I'm afraid I agree with the City of Winchester Trust's comments. I just hope that this will not turn into not a blank canvas, but I hope we don't get, people going around thinking, oh, I'd like to do more to that wall or whatever. So please make sure, if possible, that we do keep a close eye on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Robert, I will be supporting it, but and I thank the Chair for bringing my attention to page 161 as to Hampshire County Council not raising any objections. I can only hope that the planting can be positioned, and perhaps then they will get the Hampshire Highways involved, and perhaps they can make the pathways safer for the visiting residents and the visiting people that come to enjoy the events. And I'm very keen to see it move forward as well. Thank you, Chair.
Any other comments? I mean, anything would improve what's there, because it just is blocks of concrete, isn't it? Concrete jungle. I noticed that the City of Winchester Trust is hoping that the outside space can be shared between tenants. So I'm sure that's been noted. I think possibly we could have done a bit more had there been the budget. That's probably the key issue. Of improving what we've added to the area, but anything added to the area has to improve it. And it is difficult to add to the biodiversity when all you've got is concrete and tarmac to deal with. So, but attempts on that would have been appreciated. But yes, I mean, I can see no material planning reasons to object to this. So I should be supporting the recommendation. Are we at that point? Are we at the voting point? So this application has been recommended for approval. Those in favour, please show.
Unanimous, Chair.
So that application has been approved. I'm going to take the next application because we have members of the public waiting to speak and listen to it. So we're moving on to. Yes, of course. Yes, we need time for changeover. So we move on to agenda item 13, which is 22/01136/FUL, and its change of use of agricultural land for equestrian purposes. And it's an erection of 2 stables and 1 feed store and new access track off an existing one. And it's land southwest of Oak Dean, Southwick Road, Wickham. Marge Ballinger is the case officer. When you're ready, Marge, we're ready to hear your presentation.
Thank you, Chair. On the update sheet, I just wanted to call attention to after the reports were drafted, the manure storage and method of removal has been approved by the Environmental Protection Team. So the condition was amended to reflect that particular feedback from that team. And also there was 1 comment received in support of the proposal, and it was received after the reports were written. This slide, it shows the aerial view of the site. It's located along the south of the B2177 or Southwick Road. Let me show you here on the cursor. Southwick Road from Wickham. The entrance to the site can be accessed off of Black Cottage Lane. The site is accessed along a lane that follows this line. And the lane is shared by local residences and is also a public right-of-way. Oak Dean is the dwelling here and has other outbuildings along the rear boundary near its rear access off of Black Cottage Lane. Across the road is land within the South Downs National Park. And the site is adjacent deciduous woodland, which is located here. And further north of the site, along the west boundary, is residential land, and that includes a provisional protected tree. Just want to note that the TPO application was submitted in August after receiving this planning application, so it might not be demonstrated on some of the drawings. Southeast of the site is land noted as ancient woodland down in this corner, and is also a site of interest for nature conservation, aka a SINC. This is the existing site boundary, and the boundary within red here is proposed to be formally changed from agriculture to equestrian for the private use of the owners of Oak Dean. There has been planning approval for replacement buildings along the rear here of Oak Dean. And there's some residential parking. There's also another storage building in this land beyond, outside of the proposal site. There's an existing motor repair business across the lane here. And vehicle parking for that is within the east boundary of Oak Dean. And not seen very well within this slide, there is an existing track that runs behind the rear gardens of the dwellings along the front of the road, but it runs just partway through the site. I've added an additional slide from the submitted reports pack just to define what land is within ownership of Oak Dean. The blue sites here and here, north, obviously the residential curtilage of Oak Dean, and this field beyond here is both within the ownership of Oak Dean. There are, just to reiterate, there are existing outbuildings within the residential curtilage of Oak Dean and also within this field just south of the dwelling. And although the site was previously cultivated for agricultural purposes, historically the lower field on the right appears to have been left for grazing purposes only when viewing historic maps. Only the proposal site within the red edge appears to have been cultivated, so this major part of the land here, this is the area that is proposed for equestrian use. The GIS map on the right is from the year 2000 that shows the extent of the existing track. The window I'm seeing, is that over? No, never mind. Just making sure that everyone can see the map. It shows the existing track from the year 2000, and there was an outbuilding in the center of the field. That's since been removed from somewhere between 2000 and 2013, but there was part of an existing track through that field. And this is the proposed site plan. And the site indicates where post and rail fencing has been installed to create separate paddocks. The hedge along the north and the side will be retained and enhanced, but not removed. The proposal includes extending the existing gravel track along toward the western portion of the land and then south. And then here in the corner, a storage and feed building is to be installed with its access from the east elevation from the track. Sorry, 2 elevations. There's a door, and then there's one from the east elevation. And then a manure store is proposed here. And then there are 2 stable buildings. The storage for manure is used to be used by a nearby farmer for fertilizer and collected when the trailer or storage container is full, or at a minimum of every 3 months. Details of the storage and disposal have been approved by the environmental protection team. This is the proposed feed store. This is similar to an existing storage building located near the road access. And there's a photo of this that you'll see later on in the presentation. This building will be 8 meters by 12 meters and up to 5 meters at ridge. The building will be built of galvanized steel and fence walls and roof and finished in a green color. These are the proposed stable buildings. There are 3 stalls within each building. The dimensions are 5.4 meters by 6.6 meters and up to 3.6 meters at ridge. The materials proposed are shiplap cladding with a slate effect roof. No external lighting on any of the proposed buildings, and this will be controlled via condition 4. This is to compare the original as far as the amended drawings. Policy DM12 is our local plan policy on equestrian development. The previous site plan, as demonstrated here on the left, proposed 4 stables near to the separate paddocks and was considered scattered development and not in compliance with that policy. Amended drawings were received and a further publicity period was provided for public comment, demonstrating the grouping of the stables and the feed store. Here are the existing photos. Photos 1 and 2 demonstrate the existing access off of Black Cottage Lane, and a storage building here, shown here, is in the land just south of Oakdean. And this is the type of building that is proposed to be built, and the other are in the proposal for this application. Photo 3 is a view of the existing hard standings central to the field that had a former outbuilding removed several years ago, but the hard standing is still in place. Views of the existing woodland is demonstrated in the background here. Buildings will be located in the corner. These are photos more central to the site, as shown here in the site plan. Photo 4 is a view from the gravel lane toward the dwelling, which is known as Park View. Photo 5 is a view toward the boundary through to Meadows End. That's looking at the side boundary, so I'm looking west. Side boundary of Meadows End. The provisional TPO tree is located near this boundary, and I believe it is shown, but there were no further track or buildings near that, proposed near that for me to do a thorough inspection. It's just this field is just to be used for grazing. Photo 6 is a view south toward the end of the tree line where the proposed buildings will be located. And the view was taken from the track that is proposed. And these are more existing photos. Photo 7 is a closer view of the area where the buildings are to be located. The dirt mounds are spillover from Oakdean's replacement garden buildings, and the mounds are not expected to remain. Photo 8 is a view back north toward where the track is to be installed, looking back toward the rear of Parkview in the distance there. The dwelling west, which is Meadows End, is located behind this tree line and well screened. Photo 9 is a view back through toward the east, demonstrating the slight slope of the land. The land from that corner slopes slightly from west to east and south to north. The buildings along the lane are shown in the background, barely visible here. And these are photos from closer to the existing rear gardens along the track. Photo 10 is an existing view from the portion of the track back toward the dwellings, Parkview and Solva's rear gardens, located along here. And there are other outbuildings in the distance near the access of Black Cottage Lane. Photo 11 is an existing view toward the rear garden of Solva, with its dwelling located more toward the B2177, further away from the field's track. Photo 12 is the view from the gap adjacent Oakdean and Solva. The dwelling Meadows End is over 60 meters away from this track, and the dwellings, from that track. And the other dwellings, Parkview, Solva, and Oakdean, are over 50 meters away from the track. Photo 14 demonstrates the wider views toward the proposed southwest corner of the site where the equestrian buildings are to be positioned along the tree line. A wider view photo 15 shows a wider view from the portion of the track back toward the dwelling at Parkview. And to conclude, it is considered that the proposed change of use of the land for equestrian purposes, the additional storage and stable buildings, and the extension of the existing gravel track does not have a detrimental impact on the character and appearance of the rural area, is not considered to have an adverse impact on residential amenities of the local residences. The countryside location is necessary for the proposed equestrian use, and the drawings were amended to respect the longer distance used from the local residential land and the public right-of-way. The proposal, therefore, is in accordance with the policies of the development plan.
Thank you. When we get into questions, I want to ask questions about several of those photos, Marge, but I won't do it now. We're into public speaking, and the first public speaker is an objector, Chris Chamberlain. Good afternoon. And you will have 3 minutes, and those minutes will start when you start speaking.
Okay, thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to speak on behalf of those registered to object. Before showing objections, we'd like to point out some significant errors in the application itself, which, in our opinion, prevent a fair determination, and therefore we believe that any decision should be at least deferred until the assessments can be completed. In particular, we believe the application does not accurately show the already constructed and similar buildings on site, meaning that an assessment of compact versus dispersed development is not possible. These existing buildings are in the opposite corner of Oakdean, far closer to the public highway. The application fails to declare that it's significantly retrospective, with parts of the existing access track and all of the fence line actually only laid this year. And in particular, it should be noted that the earthworks have already started in the location of the proposed feed store, which itself is an area of historical interest. The application fails to declare several factors of ecological aspects, such as proximity to the sink, proximity to vegetation trees and woodland, and proximity to areas that protected species occupy at present. Given that this application is significantly retrospective, the requested assessments, to the best of our knowledge, have not been completed, such as the required archaeological mitigation works, which were requested only to the immediate proximity of Roman roadside settlements and Bronze Age features. In addition to those points, we raise the following objections against the amended application. It's our belief that the application is contrary to policy DM12 and the LCA,
as the application is concentrated at a point that is least accessible from a public highway and the most remote from a public highway, and indeed from the existing buildings. It does not make use of existing infrastructure, i.e. the buildings omitted from the site plan. It involves the erection of new buildings and features which harm the landscape and are isolated in development, in particular the extensive access track across the field. It involves the use of materials and boundary treatments that would have an adverse impact on the landscape. In our opinion, the application presents significant ecological concerns. Wildlife and ancient hedging have already been displaced by gullies that have been dug. The manure store is within 100 metres of natural drains to the River Mearn, giving rise to nitrate concerns. And we also have concerns about the proximity to bat roosts in areas used by barn owls for hunting and birds for nesting. There's mention of a soakaway. This is an area of concern since adjacent the adjacent site is prone to flooding, and compacted land to the east is likely to increase the risk of this. We've already highlighted the historical significance, and therefore we'd raise an objection of any further development until the requested archaeological surveys can be completed. Proposal of vehicles frequently accessing the far end of the site to support equestrian development in a location directly adjacent to local residents is a significant intensification detrimental to the enjoyment of neighbouring properties. Lastly, third-party commercial vehicles regularly access the site, and a third-party caravan is stored in its direct proximity. It's notable that the only comment in support of the application is from the scrap dealer of one of the third parties who lives over 20 minutes from the site.
The time is up, Mr. Chamberlain.
Thank you
very much. But don't go, because there might be some supplementary clarification questions for you. Are there? Could I just ask about ownership of the, and we might perhaps need the very first map that you've got, Marge, of the track which is going to be used for this. The one where it's got the red and the blue line, I think was back at the beginning, right? So ownership of the track is within the applicant's Oak Dean, or?
That is my understanding.
Yeah, where do you live, Mr. Chamberlain?
The very bottom portion of that picture, it would either be called Farfields or Bowman, depending on the age of the image.
Right, okay. So the ownership of the track down to where they're going to access, although I understand that it's been extended already, is within Oak Dean's curtilage. Is that right?
That is my understanding.
Yeah. And do you own the top bit of the track, or?
No, all of the access track going broadly from east to west on that picture is within the ownership of Oak Dean.
Right, okay. Thank you. Any further questions of clarification? And you say this is retrospective. It doesn't say that in our reports, but it has already been built. Save the building for the food store.
The fence line was all erected this year. I saw from the satellite imagery that there was a track that went fully from east to west. In fact, that track has not existed for a long time. It's been grown over a field for a long time. The remaining portion of that east to west track was installed this year.
Right, thank you. Any further questions? No, so thank you very much indeed for coming along. Now we move to the Parish Council representative, Councillor Lorraine Rappé. Good afternoon. You know the drill because you've been along before. You have 3 minutes, which will start when you start speaking.
When the parish received this application, it was noticed that much of the proposed development had been undertaken and should more accurately have been described as a retrospective application. The details provided did not clearly indicate the location of existing buildings and only became clearer on a site visit. These buildings are closer to the road and seemingly could be more easily utilised for the required purpose, besides providing more effective use for the vehicle and field access. The proposals for the location of the stables, grain store and manure are at the furthest point from the road, so requiring the construction of a long track and in so doing generate heavy traffic running close to and passing along the entire length of some neighbours' homes. It's noticed that the landscaping team requested details before work commenced, which seemingly did not occur. Bearing in mind that the site is close to known Roman roadside settlements, approximately 10 metres away, besides sites of nature conservation, it's considered that there has been insufficient attention allocated to cover both the archaeological aspects and the ecological environment that include bat roost, barn owls, nesting birds, and veteran oaks. Adjacent to this site is also an area that is very prone to flooding. Environmental protection has asked for protection of this environment to benefit residents from light protection and the actual appearance of the area. It's requested that the details of the facilities for the storage of horse manure and its means of disposal should be submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority before use of the stables is commenced. The parish reconsidered the amended application and continue with its views that it is still contrary to the local plan policy DM12 equestrian development in that the buildings are scattered across the site, creating a detrimental impact on the local landscape. It still fails to make use of the current infrastructure as well as having adverse impact on landscape appearances. Parish Council respectfully requests that this application is not supported by the Planning Committee.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Councillor Rappe? Councillor Laming.
My apologies. Whereabouts would the Roman road be on this map?
Your map there,
No,
but
sorry.
Could I ask Chris to just...
Yeah? That's okay with you, Chairman?
The known sighting of the Roman road runs broadly across Farfields, which is my property at the bottom there, going into the diagonal bottom left-hand side of the proposed site. So the proposed site of I think the new feed store, as it's termed, it's within 5-10 metres of that.
You were talking about there's a possibility of a settlement around that area. Is there any evidence of that, and where would that be?
That has been documented within a historical report undertaken within the parish. The Roman settlement and the Bronze Age artefacts, I can't point on a map and say exactly where they are, but they were identified between Wickham Village, going down to Wickham Common, which is exactly where this area sits.
Thank you.
Mr. Chamberlain, I'm being informed that you've already spoken. Thank you very much. And naughty Councillor Laming in bringing up an issue which... But yes, anyway, yes. No, Mr. Chamberlain's not on the parish. I don't think.
He visits every month.
Oh, right.
And comes to committee meetings as well.
So that makes him an assistant to the parish council. Any more questions for Councillor Rappe? No? So thank you very much, Councillor Rappe, for making the effort to come in. And that is it for the public speaking. Marge, did you want to add anything to what you've heard?
Yes, Chair, thank you. The fencing was put in because that's considered permitted development. So I'm not understanding what is considered retrospective. The dirt mounds, I was told, were leftover spillover from when the applicant has built his rear garden buildings to the rear of his curtilage, and those mounds are expected to be removed. But there's also an archaeology condition in place for any further development, for any development to start, that there needs to be a proper WSI and assessments made to document anything found.
Could I just ask, because I can't see where I can ask it in the report. So they've moved the blocks now of the 3 horses, but that adds up to 6 horses. Are we allowed to take into account the amount of green that's available for the possible 6 horses? I don't know what's planned.
Well, the entire site is to be proposed to be converted to equestrian purposes for grazing. So each of these paddocks are created for the 6 horses.
Oh, I see. So are those paddocks now divided up?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I see. I
Yes.
thought it was historic, but it's now new.
Mm-hmm.
So there are 6. Okay. So how are they? Oh, they go down the track then to get to one to the other. So to get from the stables to the field that's their field, they go down the track. The horses. Am I wrong? Yeah, but they have to go down the track to get to the gate. And the track is new and that's permitted development?
No, the track was existing up to this point, the center point. So
Which point? Sorry. Yes,
the center,
but the bit down to the stables is new.
yeah, the one over
And
west and south.
permitted development.
No, that one, that hasn't been built yet.
So I see, right. Difficult without going on site to know what's there. So the track is in existence to behind the 2 houses there, Silver and Parkview. All right, I see. Yeah, got it. And the proposal to carry that track on and down to the 2 blocks of stabling and the food store is permitted development.
No, that's part of the proposal.
Right.
The track extension and the building of the stables and the proposed storage and feed store are part of the proposal for this application.
Because that's currently countryside.
Yes.
Right, okay. So the
Well,
fact that
it's currently
countryside-
agricultural purposes.
Pardon?
The use of the land currently is for agricultural purposes, and they
see.
want to change it to equestrian.
Equestrian development. Okay, thank you. Well, I haven't any further questions on that. So shall we go to the report, councillors, which starts with principle of development on page 192. Councillor Rotter.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure if this is principal development, but I'll give it a go. Is there a minimum sized paddock per horse, sort of recommended acreage? And if there is, does this comply with that recommendation? And if it doesn't, is that allowed, or are there any restrictions on how many horses you can keep per acre? And is there a condition that says no more than 6 horses? Because if that's what they've got at the moment, I'm concerned that there shouldn't actually be any more than that on this. Maybe too many already. And you've got the right map up on the screen. So the area that is currently agricultural and wants to be changed to equestrian use is in the red line. The blue line is in the ownership. Is the blue line already equestrian and therefore not in part of this application, but is going to be used for the 6 horse, well, one of the 6 horses?
My understanding is the proposal is just for the change of use of this land. Although our corner field here has not been cultivated according to some of the historical GIS maps, there has been known to have some animals grazing in that land, but it's not for us to consider within this planning application.
What about is there any, you know?
To be honest, I do not know the welfare of animals and stables. And
should that be a planning consideration or not?
I've already asked, and I think
if it would help, I think this application is for private, recreation for private horses. And yes, there are standards that the British Horse Society recommend for grazing horses, but actually what most people do is supplement that feed and bring that on. So I really don't think in terms, spatially, I think this is quite a generous size space for that number of horses personally, and I don't think we could sustain a reason for refusal on here. You could, as agricultural land, we graze this quite intensively and support that feed too, and that wouldn't require permission. I appreciate we're here looking at proposal for private equestrian proposals, but yeah, they can be supplemented and it wouldn't be a reason for refusal, Chair.
Thank you. And I noticed that we have a condition that says it's for private use. Good. Is it possible to put a restriction on the number of horses, or with supplementary feeding, are we saying they can have as many horses as they like on there?
It's a tricky one, Chair. I think what I'd say is, imagine if, sheep or other animals on here graze, couldn't it? I suppose to some degree you might say that the stables that are proposed limiting are, but they could have horses here that are used to being left out. So I'm not sure it would be reasonable to condition it in my view. Ms Hutchins was just reminding me that sometimes we might do that on where people are coming to and from commercial enterprise, but this, as we say, is private, and I just don't think it's reasonable, Chair, to condition.
On that note, I'm looking at condition 8, which says that it should be private, and all the other things that go with it, no living accommodation and so on. But is that tight enough for it not to be used for livery? 6 horses are quite a lot for one household to manage. Does it say that it can't be used for livery? That you don't take it's your.
We have limited it in the past. Private use, 2 or 3 boxes at normally 1 horse per box. That's what we've looked at in the past. I don't know whether it's changed since then.
Yeah, I think we looked at this quite closely when we looked. Yeah, okay.
Thank you, Chair. We're just having a quick conflab here to think about that. There's no reason why we couldn't be more explicit, is there, and say nor livery. But I think, in my view, a private use is different to livery and commercial. But let's be clear. There's no doubt.
Well, it could be a business of. I mean, the applicant is not here, so we don't know what the use is going to be. Otherwise, we could ask the applicant. But it could be a business. Okay, managed by Oak Dean, but this condition allows this.
Sure.
So it could be a business which is run by Oak Dean, so it's private to Oak Dean, but it could be other people's horses being kept there.
Chair, it specifically says that it would be private equestrian use, prevent it from being used for commercial purposes. For their use alone.
If we add the words "and livery" to the preclude, one of the things they can't do, then does that completely cover it? Thank you.
Chair? Sorry. No, me. Okay, go on.
Yeah, I'm perhaps trying to get a handle on the same question of the scale of operation and the impact it will have on the landscape. I'm thinking here of buildings. The proposed store is 12 by 8 meters and 5 meters high, which is not probably a bit smaller in my judgment, I know, than this room that we're sitting in. It's a big building. And my question would just be, is that reasonable size, given its impacting on the landscape, for a private operation of this scale? I'm not a countryman. I genuinely don't know.
You think it is reasonable or unreasonable?
I don't know. I'm asking whether it is.
Is it reasonable?
The considered opinion that it is.
Food store, is it of a reasonable size?
I mean, it's a trick. I'm not what people tell us is that actually to buy this sort of in place, and it's not dissimilar to feed in. I suppose our job really isn't to say whether that's what they need or not, say whether it's in planning terms, which I know is really tricky because it needs to be that size, but actually, you know, we need to assess the planning impacts rather than demand, if you like.
Okay, so a question of reasonableness is not appropriate here. Thank you.
Councillor Lamy.
Thank you, Chair. Going back to the number of horses, can we put in condition that the horses are owned by are under the ownership of the landowner, not used for commercial purposes?
I don't think that's what we're saying, because the
I'm asking if
owner
we can.
would be within his rights to say, I've got a field, put your horse in it. And right, aren't I? So what we've added, and with the slight reluctance of our legal advisor, is we've added in no livery, and no payment involved, no business, commercial.
I think, Chair, the only thing
we can't stop, you know, how it's used.
I think the only thing we were thinking in terms of Councillor Lane's question is that whether someone actually owns something,
yeah.
You know, I wouldn't want to drill down to the, you know, you must own it, because I think that in legal terms that might be quite difficult, but it's the private usage for the benefit of the occupiers of that dwelling that is key here in planning terms.
Because we also looked at the number of horses per field size when we looked at the other property that had the stables next to next door's swimming pool last year.
That Hayden Farm barn you're talking
That's
about
it.
there,
That's the
Chair.
one I was trying.
I hate to remind this committee,
Yeah.
we just recently lost an appeal on that site.
Did we lose it?
Yes, we did.
Have we got a condition on the colour of this food store, whether it be large or not? Because it is the two houses that are down below that looked out into countryside, and now they look at, you know, the stables and the food store. So will the colour of the buildings blend in with the countryside? I haven't got a condition on that.
I believe the material colors are noted on the drawings, but we could enhance the materials to say the green corrugated color.
I think I'd like that to happen.
Chairman, in that case, I'd recommend an amendment to condition 9. At the moment, we're just saying that they should do the works in accordance with what they've already specified.
Yes.
Now, I don't know the exact detail of that, Marge would, but we could go a little bit further if members.
Okay, good, thank you. We've got the South Downs National Park again, but I can't see that it's affecting the National Park. The South Downs National Park is actually the widest or the longest national park. That's why it keeps appearing in our planning applications, because it goes all the way over to Winchester and then all the way back over to Eastbourne. So that's why it keeps appearing. Historic environment archaeology. Okay. And then neighbouring amenities. And then all the rest of the report. Sustainable transport, ecology and biodiversity, sustainable drainage, quality and planning balance. Councillor Pearson.
Yes, I mean, neighbourhood amenities. I'm looking at what's on the photograph, this one, Marge, page 204. There seems to be a motocross field there. Is that related to Oak Dean, or is that dead and defunct? Is that related to this application?
Are you talking about this field here?
Well, it's directly to the east of Oak Dean.
No, that's outside the proposal
I don't think
site.
they own that, do they?
No, that's outside.
It's obviously accessible from the track.
So it's not relevant to this application.
Not related to the application,
No,
fair enough.
because he doesn't own it.
Yeah, well,
Or
I was curious because it's
they
quite
don't
clearly
own
shown
it.
in the photograph.
Right. Anything else? No. So, debate. Councillor Pearson.
Yeah, and we're always transfixed by stable applications, of which we have many, particularly in the southern parishes. It seems to be one of the main occupations and the main reason for taking land out of farming. Although arguably, if a horse is actually not used to riding, it is farming. If it's for equestrian use, i.e. Family use, it actually is equestrian rather than something else. It's always exercises. Normally, as I understand it, British Horse Federation recommends, doesn't insist, it can't insist, something in the region of an acre per horse. Looking at that application, it seems to fit with, if we're already talking about 5 or 6 horses. Beyond that, I think they might be pushing a look, but they clearly do plan on importing hay, hence the food hay store. But also, I would think, looking at your photographs, Marge, they could obviously take crops of hay from the paddock, so they could rotate in that sense, which would cover what appears to be a small-sized food store. But that again is not part of the application, other than it does dictate what has already gone, and that is the permitted development, which is the food store. I think for us to turn this down would be very difficult. Biodiversity point of view, well, it effectively is a meadow. If it's going to be untended, in other words, used as a meadow, you could argue that the meadow itself is a biodiversity plus. Particularly if it's been taken out of what is called traditional farming, i.e. ploughing the land, which does release carbon into the land. But if it's allowed, it's fallow land, then you've got legumes within the grass, which is good for the horses, which is going, because it's a nutrient, is going to be a plus point for them as well. Bearing that in mind, woodland on either side, except next to the Southwark Road, but it's back, we see those stables and the food store. The background behind them are trees. And if the food store particularly is green, I think you'd have to be looking very closely to actually see it if you're driving past. I find it difficult to say, no, I don't like this, because we see so many of these examples. I've got plenty of them in my own ward, which have been accepted on with similar descriptions, Marge. I mean, this is not taking from your description. I think it's very good. But I think we've got to take that in mind. The precedent's there, although not precedent on this site. So, yes, I do agree with your comment that it should be permitted.
Any further contributions? Councillor Clear.
Thank you, Chair. I sincerely trust that this will stay as private use, but I personally think Condition 8 covers all that. I know you wish to add no livery, but I think Condition 8 covers it, fingers crossed. I really can't see that this application is harmful in any respect, sorry, and so I do agree with the officer's recommendation.
Any further contributions? Councillor Cook.
I will be the same opinion as the officer, but there is one point that I've picked up on in the report, and it clearly says no lights. And being an ex-person who's had horses, it's very difficult to look after horses when the seasons change and there's no lights. So I think that is certainly something that will obviously end up being our enforcement department that would look at. But I'm concerned, and we must make sure that that is carried forward. No lighting. It clearly does say it in the report. But on the grounds that you've presented this report, I would be the same as yourself. I would be recommending it. But that does concern me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cook. I mean, if lights are a problem, then an application can always come in to put in lights. But I personally feel that lights are distracting in the countryside, and we do have policies on, lights in the countryside. And there are types of lights as well, lights that shine down, not up. Anything else? I can understand neighbours' concerns personally, because it was just agricultural land, and suddenly we end up with 6 horses, and views in of stables and feed stores. Why the colour is so important, and the fact that it's retrospective. Now, I know people can undertake retrospective planning applications at their own risk, but when it's something which is intrusive or a change in the countryside, I do think there should be pre-app advice, and I think they should listen to officers, because there might be a better solution to the one that's been chosen. Anyway, this one has been chosen. It was dotted around the stables, but now they put them all down in the furthest corner. So yeah, that's better. They are improving the landscaping between Solva and Park View, so that's good, and from a biodiversity. But you can see into this site at the moment. Can I put my usual request in for consideration for wildlife boxes, birds or swifts, because it's new buildings and they should be able to include those. Is it in the recommendations? I didn't think it was. Couldn't see it.
I think, Chair, it isn't recommended in this case because it's next to an existing woodland, and condition 3 talks about retaining and enhancing the hedgerow, so we're not looking to take anything out. Difficult to add that.
That's not the point though, with bird boxes of disappearing species, because they're not there to start with, because all their habitat elsewhere has been taken away. So this assumes that they're not taking anything out, but I'm asking for consideration for swift boxes are my big thing, but sparrows as well, and bats are considered for the buildings.
Sorry, I would suggest an informal. Recommend that to the applicant.
Is that it for contributions from the committee? So we've got on our update sheets a change to condition 5 regarding the disposal, storage and disposal of manure. We've got a change, I hope, to adding in livery, no livery. We've got an informative saying what I've just discussed, the addition of wildlife species. I think that was it. So if those extras are agreed to by the committee.
Agreed.
We'll put this.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Did you mention condition 9 and about the materials and the colour?
Oh yes. Well, I thought that it was said by you that condition 9 covered the colour.
Well, it does insofar as they've specified what colour it will be in that condition, just as they must do it. And I think and make you happy with.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair.
So you adapt that
please.
to how you want to adapt it. You normally run it past me, don't you?
Yeah, we'll do, Chair.
So with all that taken in as into account, this application has been recommended for approval. Those in favour, please show. So that application has been approved. Thank you. Would you like a break, councillors, or would you like to go on?
Can I just clarify something before we move on?
Yeah.
I don't consider any of this application as retrospective. The fences were installed under permitted development. None of the buildings have been built. The track might have been reinstated to the point where it was existing, but it didn't create a new track. So I just wanted to clarify that that's why it doesn't say that within the proposal.
Taken offence at my statement that
No,
it's
but
not
it
in
does,
the report.
normally I would put that in the proposal if any of it
Okay.
was, okay, thank
I
you.
take that on board. Councillors, do you want a break before the last one? Yes. It's been a long day, so we will take a quick break. I don't know. 5 to? Too long? How long would you like? Hands up those who want to keep going. I'm afraid, Jane, that you and I are outvoted. So we will keep going with the application that we see on the screen. Could I just clear something up? The name of the property that we're considering, is it the Brambles or is it Melmerby?
The 3 houses along that road are, I believe, are 1 through 4, the Brambles.
Yeah.
Number 2 has changed their name to Melmerby.
Okay, and it's number 2 that we're considering.
Yeah.
Okay. So we move on to agenda item 14, which is 22/01313/HOU. This is an extension and conversion of the side garage and construction of a new first floor over at the Brambles, Melmerby, Spring Lane in Swanmore. And Marge is again the case officer.
Thank you again. So just to clarify, this road, these houses here are referred to as the Brambles, because Spring Lane travels this way and also travels north. Very confusing in this part of Swanmore if you're looking for a particular building. But Melmerby is located west of this portion of Spring Lane here. Spring Lane has accesses to Chapel Lane, and there are cul-de-sacs nearby, Willow here, Russet, Leacock, and Rowan. This area is considered sustainable with shops and schools and bus stops within walking distance, approximately 1/3 of a mile. On the left is a map of the existing site demonstrating the dwelling, the garage, and parking for 2 cars forward of the garage. The north boundary of the site is slightly offset here with the boundary of number 3. Numbers 1 and 3 have existing graveled parking forward of their front gardens, but their gardens are slightly deeper than Melmerby's. You can see this within the proposed site plan, the front elevations.
Is there any way you could make the parking larger? Because I think that's the key. Can't do that. No.
You mean
You can't
blow
put your
this up?
finger on the screen and make it bigger.
There's a
No.
slide to
Okay.
go into more
Okay.
detail about this. I have a larger version of that site plan to show it. So basically, Melmerby's elevation is slightly forward of the 2 adjacent properties. And Spring Lane along this portion has pedestrian access only on the left side of the road, and the right has no pavement and is just a grass verge. So this part of Spring Lane is very narrow. It would be very unsafe for anyone to park on the road. It's not going. Bear with. There we go. Thank you. And these are the existing plans. The ground floor indicates the position of the garage with space for parking to the front of the drive in this area. There is a grassed front garden and a low picket fence near the pavement and a shallow porch along the front here as well. Dwelling has 4 bedrooms, and currently the garage is used for domestic storage and a temporary gym room. These are the existing elevations, although you can't see in the drawings. The dwellings are red brick with concrete tiled roofs and white fascia windows and doors. And these are the proposed plans. And it includes a garage conversion and extension by building 3.3 meters forward, but retaining the rear and side wall placements. The ground floor will include a kitchen extension, separate utility room, and a small studio for a gym. The first floor will be extended to include a 5th bedroom. The proposed elevations here shows a 2-story garage extension and will have similar roof pitches as the existing with a front-facing gable. And its ridge line will be set subservient to the overall roof ridge, only up to about 6.5 meters compared to the existing, and forward 3.3 meters. Note that the front elevation retains a ground floor side-facing window and is set back slightly from the front elevation. There are no further side-facing windows. The proposal includes matching eaves and similar window placement as the existing. And this is the proposed site plan and parking. The plan was clarified with amendments to indicate space for the 3rd vehicle. A larger shrub or tree to the front of the property will be removed, and block tire runs will be built within the existing grass. 2 parallel parking spaces are retained forward of the former garage, noted here. Parking standards for a 5-bedroom dwelling require at least 3 off-road parking spaces per the Winchester Parking Supplementary Planning document. Space size recommendations for perpendicular parking are 2.4 by 4.6 meters. Sorry, 4.8 meters. For parallel parking, spaces recommended are 2.2 meters by 6 meters. And please note this is a clarification. That was what was included in the report packs. I think I had perpendicular and parallel swapped, if anyone noticed. Although parking within the front garden would be tandem only, the space demonstrated meets the requirements while allowing for the retention of the front fence, shallow planting, and access into the dwelling. These are the existing photos. Number 1 demonstrates the front elevation, parking area, and the existing garage. Number 3 on the right sits slightly back behind the front elevation of Melmerby, as mentioned previously. Number 2 is a real elevation from the site, looking back toward the garage and the dwelling of number 3 and the rear elevation. The setting back of the buildings is more obvious within this photo. Photo 3 is the view south toward number 1's rear garden. And number 4 is the view west toward the dwelling directly behind, located in number 7 Leacock. Number 7 sits on land slightly higher than the proposal site with its fence and planting slightly above 2 meters. The window shown is a 1st floor window. Photo 5 demonstrates the existing gap between Melmerby and number 3. And this is where the extension will be built above the garage. The 2.4 meter gap between the 2 buildings will be retained. Photo 6 is the existing view toward number 3's rear elevation, where its 1st floor windows are visible. Photo 7 is a view of number 1 here in this photo. And that dwelling is south of the proposal site. And you can also see the rear elevation windows in this photo as well. And these photos demonstrate how narrow the rear gardens are and the potential for indirect views into neighboring gardens as existing. Photo 8 demonstrates an existing ground floor window to number 3 here on the side. This room is for a small WC, as I expect both of these houses are mirror opposites of each other. The side extension proposed will come slightly forward of this window. Photo 9 demonstrates the existing view from number 3's rear garden back toward Melmerby, where the proposed extension and a new rear window is to be built. The garage is located here, and this is where the second story extension will be built. Photo 10 is the rear seating area to number 3 under the open trellis. Again, these are more photos that demonstrate how narrow the gardens are and the potential for indirect views into neighboring gardens from the existing rear-facing windows. These are photos for the neighbor located west of the site. This is taken from the proposal site looking back toward number 7. The existing first floor window is demonstrated, but has been noted to be a bathroom. Photo 12 is the existing side passage along number 7, back toward the fence and planting along the boundary. And number 13 was taken from the rear garden of number 7, looking back toward Melmerby. The garage is very visible, but this is where the second story extension will be built in this area here. But although there will be a second story extension built, it will be approximately 1.3 meters lower than the ridge line showed in this photo. These photos demonstrate the parking, existing and proposed considerations. Number 14 demonstrates the space along the front where parking forward of the extended garage. And number 15 has the proposed building line noted just to the other side of the window. Basically, these blocks and bricks show where the proposed extension will be. And this is the space for the car parking when the proposed is built. And just to note, photos 14 and 15 were taken at the same time, demonstrating, although these are small cars, there's sufficient space for 2 cars to be parked in this area once the extension is built. The gravel drive remaining for the 2 vehicles measures 5.1 by 5.5 meters. And this is typical and sufficient for an average car. Photo 16 shows my measuring tape. I've been out there twice just to confirm some of the measurements, as there was confusion to the drawings and the OS documents. So we remeasured just to make sure. But photo 16 shows my measuring tape at 2.5 meters. There's the end of my tape, down to where we expect the planting to start. So this indicates there's a sufficient room for a car park and sufficient room for the door opening. And again, this is the width of the proposed car parking width, not the proposed car. So there will be a gap on each side for a car. Photo 17 also shows that 2.5 meter measurement near the front entrance where the porch is extended. And again, this allows for sufficient parking for a car. And these are the nearby area roadways. Photo 18 is a view back toward Melmerby here. Again, no street parking is available along this road due to its width. And obviously you see the grass verge on one side and the pavement on the other side. Photo 19 demonstrates the dwellings north of the site, numbers 3 and 4. And number 3 has front parking available forward of its porch, but again, the garden is slightly deeper than compared to Melmerby. And photos 20 and 21 are other views of the roads nearby where there's little roadside parking demonstrated. However, there are no parking restrictions in place to prevent parking on other roads or within cul-de-sacs near the proposal site. And to conclude, the garage conversion and extensions are designed to complement the existing dwelling and do not have a detrimental impact on the character and appearance of the area. The extension does not exceed its north or west facing elevations, demonstrates subservience to the existing dwelling, and is not considered to have an adverse impact on the residential amenities in terms of shadowing, overbearing, or to the more primary amenity spaces to the adjacent neighboring properties. Although the rear gardens are narrow along this portion of the road, there are existing indirect views from first floor windows out toward neighboring rear gardens within dwellings 1 and 3. The additional rear-facing windows within the rear extension is not considered to create a material harmful difference to the existing situation. Finally, parking that satisfies the parking supplementary planning document has been provided. The proposal is therefore in accordance with the policies of the development plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we now come to the public speaking. Councillor Wallace, you've put me in a difficult position, but we will go ahead because I believe that you are speaking on behalf of Craig Blakewell, who hasn't registered to speak. But anyway, albeit if you could say to Mr. Bakewell that we do have a process and normally you have to register so many days in advance to speak. Thank you very much for offering to put forward whatever Mr. Blakewell was going to say. And you have 3 minutes, which is what residents would have. Yeah. And Councillor Wallace is one of the ward councillors. So
thank you, Chair.
When you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. For clarification, Mr. Blakeway had applied to speak at the original meeting, and he cleared his diary and managed to get the whole day off to attend the previous meeting. And unfortunately, he couldn't be here today. So he put that other day. Thank you. Okay, I'll get up his word. Yes, I'm just going to speak on behalf of Mr. Blakeway. He lives at number 3, the Brambles, which is one of the adjoining properties to Melmerby. So he's just sent me some comments to read out. He was keen to attend, but like I said, he can't. I still have concerns about the third parking space being only a nod to the planning rules. I believe it would be impractical to actual ever use, requiring both cars to vacate the existing drive before it can be accessed, of course being far too small. Concerns about overshadowing appear to have been accepted but deemed not relevant. Constant stream of revisions to the plans, some of which were done after the public consultation, leaves doubt in my mind as to their reliability. I also question some of the photos taken by the planning officer, which don't really show the true extent of the privacy impact. For example, the photo of the neighbour's bathroom window was taken at ground level and looks well covered by foliage, but if you view it from first floor height, there is no protection at all. On his points, so thank you very much.
Are there any questions of clarification for Councillor Wallace, or who's really representing the occupant of number 3, Mr. Blakemore? Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. Since you are representing the occupant of number 3, you may be able to answer this question, but it could also be directed to the permissible Chair. Just for the sake of avoidance of doubt, when I look at the plan here, for example, the picture on picture number, where are we? Picture on page 11. It'll be 22, I guess. I see 2 houses, garages, 2 side gates. And I would expect that the border between them would continue from the post between the side gates down to the pavement. So are we absolutely clear that ownership of land documented and belongs to number 2, that the parking of the middle car by number 2 rather than number 3 is not just custom practice?
Probably a question for the case officer.
Yeah,
so
well,
we'll come back to that, not for Councillor Wallace, because it's too technical for him to expect you to know. Any other questions for Councillor Wallace?
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for coming along and for representing your resident. Marge, anything you'd like to add? Probably the answer to Councillor Edwards' question.
Yes, I questioned it after my site visit because it seemed unusual, that middle parking space. And the site location plan was amended to show this correction. I've also met with number 3 just to confirm that this is the location plan. It is unusual, but that's how it was originally arranged.
May I? Thank you. Marge, on one of the 15 objecting representations, it mentions about a covenant there. There's a further covenant that restricts building works forward in the open area and forward to the property. And there's another covenant in place restricting the use of the front of the property for lawn, shrub planting, etc. I just wondered if you could comment on that, if possible, please.
It's my understanding that we assess planning applications at its own merit. So although covenants are in place, sometimes those do expire. So we look at what the planning history is and against our current policies.
Yeah.
Chair, just to clarify that a covenant, a restrictive covenant, is a civil matter. It's not something that would be able to be a reason for refusal, and it's not material to your planning deliberate.
So if it's a valid covenant, they can't build. Is that right?
Well, if it was a valid covenant, they would have to look at enforcement through this.
Circled myself. Right, so we'll move on to principle of development, which is very short and on page 220. So we'll add to that the impact on the character and appearance of the area. Councillor Rutter.
Can I just ask, I've had a quick look at the plans and so on. Is that fence, there's a picket fence along the front, isn't there, where the parking space is supposed to be going? Is that fence coming out? I think that's what I gathered from the pictures, but that confirmation.
No, the fence will be remained and supplemented planting, low-level planting along it.
Right, okay. Even less space.
On that note, how do you get to the front door? Two cars parked across the front.
I believe that's up for discussion. Obviously, I've demonstrated that there is sufficient parking and there would be space provided. So it's part of the planning process.
So there's enough space to get to the front door, a person to get to the front door.
I mean, if it helps, what I would say is normally when the parking standards, and Marge showed that on one of her earlier slides, didn't she, the width of car parking spaces, they're normally wider than the car, obviously, because it allows for door openings, getting in and out. So when those car doors, there would be space to manoeuvre to and from additional separate pathway up to the frontage, but there would be room, Chair, in my view.
Thank you. And thank you, Councillor Laming, you're next. And just one supplementary question. So the picket fence is staying and there's going to be improved planting, but the lawn, at the moment, it's lawned area. That's all going, is it?
No, the site plan shows block paved tire runs to be inserted into the lawn.
Okay. Councillor Laming.
Thank you, Chair. Two questions on one particular subject. We show on this particular application the chimney. Now, we try to avoid that on new properties under CP11 climate control. But also, if you look at page 234, it shows the chimney sticking out into next door's property. Surely that's not acceptable.
They're not building a new chimney? Are you just clarifying that if the drawings of existing and proposed?
Because looking at the pictures, it doesn't really see a chimney on any of the other pictures. Query that compared to the plan.
I mean, I think I'd say that the existing chimney is clearly shown on page D, both on the floor plans, and my looking at the. I think, you know, if there is a little bit of sometimes when you have a dwelling that sort of sides right onto the boundary, and you obviously have the chimney that sticks out, there would be an arrangement for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. If it's not the right time to be speaking about this, please do stop me. Page 233, there is a south elevation picture of the proposed. There are two windows next to this chimney that we're referring to. Am I right in saying, I think I heard our councillor say about a bathroom window? I just wanted to ask the question. I had an application like this actually in Twyford, and we were concerned about obviously the glass and also how the window would open, as opposed to it being a window that sort of opens that way, which obviously people can't hear that are listening to this, or one that just pushes underneath and opens, so that one can't be looking out of the window or anyone can look in. So I'm concerned about that. That's the right time to bring that to people's attention.
Are you talking about first floor window?
Yes, I am.
Marge comes. I was just going to say those south windows are shown on the existing and proposed, so they're not new windows there at all on the south elevation. Different window that you're referring to. Marge can assist you with that.
Are you talking about this elevation here, or next to the chimney? No, those are existing. That won't be altering. The new window proposed is in the first floor extension along the west elevation there.
Councillor Cook was asking about the possibility of opening the window. Is that impeded?
I think, Chair, I'd say that based on the windows that Councillor Cook referred to, they're existing and there's no change. I don't think we'd have any control over those. I think if we can just clarify which window you're talking
Yeah, I think it may be then the extension I'm actually referring to. When I heard speak about a bathroom window that was being overlooked, I just wanted some clarity on that, if I may. The extension that's proposed for the first floor.
I think the question was the photos were taken from the ground floor levels. This is a bathroom window to number 7. So I'm standing in the rear garden of the proposal site looking back toward number 7. And I think that was the window that they just wanted to clarify that I am taking this from the ground floor level.
So
We've crept into neighbouring amenities, and I've got a question about a window, and that is the downstairs window, because the extension is coming out, isn't it? Does it cover the window? They've got one downstairs, but presumably they're not bothered about their own window, but the neighbouring property, number 3, has a window. Is that being covered by the extension?
The extension will be moved forward. If I get to a better plan. We'll come just, I'm assuming the window, let's see, the ground floor window's here. So this elevation set slightly back, so it'll be just forward of the downstairs WC.
And anything else on the report? Which then takes us into debate. Councillor Amy.
Looking at this, I'm really quite concerned about it. It seems to be, to me, overdevelopment, this particular site. For other people's comments, but at the moment I feel quite a major problem.
Well, I think I agree. I'm not sure how I'm going to vote because I'm not sure the material planning considerations here. But what we have now are 3 or 4 properties all looking fairly similar in a row. And then what's proposed here is really, I consider, a very cramped development. Now, you're not going to be bothered by it from the back because I think it's been proved that there's sufficient vegetation. But to go up at the side of the house, which is the only one of the 4 that is doing that, but that doesn't mean that the other 3 won't do it. But then to have 2 car parking spaces at the front, which there are now, and then put 2 on the front, which would mean getting rid of the front garden, really. I know that they're increasing the planting. So I was interested in people's views as well as to how they viewed it, because I personally feel that it is probably putting too much on a small pocket handkerchief. Anyway, so I haven't decided whether I will vote for or against, but that's what I feel. I feel it's very cramped.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I have an issue. I think the parking is a big problem. And I visited the site, and parking in the road, as you all have read, is non-existent. Everything to me is so small, so narrow, and I feel it would have quite an overbearing impact. I know that's what it is, yes. I just feel, I'm sorry, that it's going to have an overbearing impact. I don't feel this extension, quite frankly, would, it's the quality and the features, and I'm sorry, and I don't think it would respond very positively to the character of the neighbourhood. So I'm sorry, Marge, but I'm not voting in favour of this one. Sorry.
Councillor Pearson.
I take it we're in debate. Just to clarify that, because it said the last 2 speakers certainly sound like a debate. Yeah, I'm also concerned about this. The main bone of contention is the extension going to how close to that boundary to the next door extension, even though the boundary does have a sort of a crooked bend in there. In fact, it makes it appear closer than it looks like from the front of the house. Certainly, the issue of where the extension is, looking at, I don't know what page number it is, but one of the page pictures you've got shows where the landing was, and I believe that window now becomes a shower room window and the extension, but there's nothing about the exit for the gas central heating. Where does that go? That's not clear in the planning application. Looking at the parking, and this frankly to me is the main bone of contention, even though the photograph that you've shown, Marge, suggests you can get 2 cars of super mini size into there, super mini modern thing, sort of like a Renault Clio sort of size. It is very close to the boundary, that's outside car. I'm not aware of any disputes about one parking area overlapping to the neighbours. But when I look at the proposal for the parking in front of the house, frankly, I find that, despite your tape measure, clearly you were concerned about that initially, I just can't see how you could get cars into the front of that house and the front garden, and then not being able to go in through the front door. I just can't see it. It assumes that the car sizes that these people have are going to stay the same size as they presently are. You put any bigger car into there, I'm sorry, it's a no-no. You couldn't get two bigger cars alongside there with existing super minis are. So, and there certainly is no space on the road to park on Spring Lane. It's just, frankly, it's not possible. It's not the narrowest part of Spring Lane, but it gets that way only a few meters going south on that lane, where it is very, very narrow. And it's, I mean, I like the extension. It's a good idea. I can see what they are getting another bedroom, bigger bedrooms, but it doesn't fit on the site. As Councillor Lamy quite rightly said, it's too big for that site. And for that reason, plus the parking, and knowing how difficult parking is at that end of Spring Lane, I'm sorry, I just can't support your conclusions, Marge. And you've written a very good report, but knowing this site, I'm a ward councillor here, just as Councillor Wallace is. I agree entirely with the expressions that Councillor Wallace has put forward. Again, I'd also say as a passing comment, actually, it was Councillor Wallace that actually asked this application to come to planning committee. Then to say, hang on, you haven't put your name down. I thought, hang on, it's there. I mean, it's, and I thought, I think he bit his tongue at that point, but that's not part of the planning application. I just cannot see how what they propose will go onto that site without cars overlapping from the site onto the road. And to get those cars in the front of the house, you'd have to remove the hedges and possibly the boundary as well to get better access. I'm sorry, for all those reasons, I can't. As nice as it is.
Councillor Rutter.
Thank you. It clearly is a narrow site, but these houses are already quite close together. And in fact, they're not going to be any closer together after this application is built out. It's going up, but it's not coming any wider. So the actual footprint of the house is only slightly increasing. I agree that it's tight on the parking. I think that it's a very sustainable area. There are buses, there are shops, there are schools. There aren't very many buses, all right. There are such things as electric bikes. There are, there are alternative means of transport that people can use other than cars. And if you bought this house, if you live in this house, people will understand that the car parking spaces are not huge, and therefore buying a large car is not a good idea. I think that, the officer recommendation is to allow it, and they've looked into this very carefully and measured everything 2 or 3 times. I suspect that we would have difficulty in supporting a refusal if it went to appeal. It's, modern day living requires bigger kitchens, these open plan kitchens and so on. If only they were putting in a study upstairs instead of another bedroom, they wouldn't have this problem about having to find another car parking space. I can't, I'm afraid. I understand and I agree that it is cramped and tight, but then it's already cramped and tight. And I don't see that this is going to make it that much worse. I mean, what you're talking about extending the actual building slightly, coming up another floor over the existing garage, and making facility for a car to go in the front a little bit by the front door. Well, that, for me, it isn't, ideally the householders wouldn't have more than 2 cars anyway, and Even if they have 3, they make sure they have little ones. I can't justify going against the officer.
Thank you. Any further contributions? Councillor Westwood.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I have the same sentiments as Councillor Rutter, to be perfectly honest. I see this as a tight fit on the site. I agree it's an extension to the house. It's not a huge extension to the house. I think the third parking space is just a nod to the planning rules, to be perfectly honest, and may not be used, who knows. But I think it's quite difficult from a planning perspective to go against the office regulations.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I find the extension overbearing, and I think it would have a dramatic look on the street scene. But it's interesting that on page 19, and there's sorry, not page 19, page 240, there's a picture of, picture is number 19, and the property to the right has a rather interesting roof change there. So perhaps their extension could be slightly smaller, and maybe they could do something to their roof, but I'm afraid I will not be agreeing with the officer on this one. Thank you so much, Chair. Thank you.
So I think we've all spoken, apart from Councillor Edwards. Have you spoken? I can't remember.
I asked a question right at the beginning. I haven't added to debate, but since you asked, Chair, I think I can. Westwood, it is a pity that we have a plan requires extra as houses have more bedrooms. May be able to change that. We are where we some reluctance support them.
So I think we're at the vote. This application has been recommended for approval. All those in favour, please show. And those against?
So 3 for, 5 against.
Thank you. So that application has been refused, but we need to come up with the reasons for refusal. Does anyone want to have a go for that? Councillor Laming?
I think it's overdevelopment of the area.
We'll come back to you, Councillor.
An impact on the local neighbourhood.
Councillor Pearson?
Okay, starting again. Effective use of land, number of us have commented on being possible overdevelopment. I think Councillor Rutter said tight to me means overdevelopment. Development principles, perhaps. Access and parking, certainly, which is DM18. There you go.
Right, I'm not sure about CP14, but shall I read out my list? It's the street scene. I don't think that this fits in with the street scene, especially as they were built as a group of 4. And I think to fill up the spaces that are left are wrong. I'm concerned about neighbourhood amenity. The slide before showed the window that I was concerned about. But anyway, I think it's too close to the neighbour next door, number 3. You can extend your property, as Councillor Cook pointed out, by going up. It doesn't affect the visual look of it. I do think that parking all over the front lawn, which we see there, number 17, is not that great a front lawn, but at least it's a lawn. And then to get rid of that and the biodiversity aspect of it, I think is a pity. What else have I got? And it sort of sets a precedent for those 4, doesn't it? Because they will, well, perhaps you don't think there's anything wrong in that committee, but they will then all put a side extension on. And what you've heard from the local members who live closest to it, and it's already a very busy road, and this is probably not a material planning consideration. So there's certainly not space outside to park without causing harm to traffic, although we probably haven't got that comment from the highways officer. And we have a lot of people living in that area, and every space and every house that can be pulled down is being pulled down. And I just don't think this is on really as a sort of extra application. Does anyone want to add anything?
Just agree with you. But as I said before, it is out of character. It's policy DM 1617. I think it's against those policies, to my mind, and DM 18. Don't agree. How those policies are worded, I don't agree with what's going on in that. That's my look upon it.
So I don't think you're going to get any more contributions. Is that enough for you?
Thank you, Chair. I've just been obviously having a look at the policies myself, having heard during debate, and it was hard to write something on the roof, isn't it? But I've had a go. A bit wordy, but I think what you're saying, I'm going to see the reason for along the lines of the development represents overdevelopment by reason of it and results in a cramped form of due to the unacceptable car parking 16 and 18, not therefore respond positively to the character and appearance. Yeah.
Yes, that's excellent. Thank you for
You
that.
just probably need to vote on that.
Pardon? Yeah.
Chairman, I mean, these houses were built at the time when
point.
Prescott was encouraging limited parking. These houses were built at the time when John Prescott was limiting housing, parking for housing.
Yeah.
That's why it's very restricted now. Cars have got bigger, not smaller.
Yeah. Well, it's because there's an extra bedroom, so that changes the policy. Right. So can we vote on those reasons for refusal? Can you please show so that we can see there's a majority?
So that's 7. Yep. And Councillor West.
Thank you. And so that application is refused. And that brings us to the end of the formal agenda. Just a reminder that, is it next Friday or is it this Friday? We're having our informal. This Friday. Oh, next Friday, yes. I'm just staggering through the week here. So next Friday, and we have an agenda as it's been sent to you, but that doesn't mean that you can't add on to that agenda. It's virtual.